So as I'm sure you're aware, today's session is on Twine. So it'll be an intro to Twine, as well as a little bit of a discussion on online privacy, especially having to do with like students and working in a school setting. We have James Martin here with us, who is, I say, an expert in Twine, and he's very enthusiastic and excited about that program. So it's really great to have him. I'll let him introduce himself in just a moment. Just before we get started, I did want to do a quick land acknowledgement. I just want to acknowledge that the Edith Lando Virtual Center is on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam and Squamish Nations, and as well that I personally work, live, and play on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Stolo Nations. And I invite all of you to put in the chat where you're from and what nations you might be close to or connected with. And with that, I'll pass it on to James. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that, Pavan. So hi, everyone. My name is James Martin. I'm an elementary music teacher in the Burnaby School District. And I wouldn't say a Twine expert, but maybe an enthusiastic amateur. I got introduced to Twine through the UBC MET program a couple of years back and have continued to use it since then. And I'm very excited to share the things that I've been learning and figuring out with Twine, because it's something that I've started incorporating into my practice as a teacher. And I'm hoping that what I'm able to share with you here will be useful to many of you. So let me just share my screen here, and I'll just do the quick intro for anyone who doesn't know anything about Twine. We'll just do the quick kind of what is Twine and why would you maybe want to use it and get to know it. Is everyone able to see my screen okay right now? Okay, brilliant, thank you. So, slideshow made in Twine here, just to get started. So Twine is an open source tool for telling interactive and non-linear stories. So these are stories where the reader or the player, if it's more like a game, can have an active part in shaping how the narrative develops. It can be non-linear, like a choose your own adventure story with multiple endings, or different things that can change depending on your interaction with the story. Twine is something that you do not need to know any coding in order to be able to work with. But if that's something that you are interested in exploring, and that's something I'll show a couple of examples of, it's not hard to get started with. And even with just a little bit, you can do a lot to make some very powerful and interesting stories and games. And if you're a teacher, for your students to do the same thing as well. So one of the reasons why I like Twine over other coding and creative platforms, first of all, it's super accessible. So it's open source. If you're really techie, more techie than I am, you can go in and see how it's all put together and see that it's, it's not siphoning your data and sending it anywhere. Lots of people have pulled it apart and verified that it's a perfectly safe tool to use. It's totally free to use. It does not require you to sign up or make an account. There's no process in using Twine where it takes any of your data or any of your students' data. It can be used online, or once you've downloaded it, entirely offline as well. You don't need an internet connection once you have the program. The things that you make with Twine can be played on any other device that has a web browser. So different computers, Mac, Linux, Windows, lots of mobile devices. If it can load a web page, it can load and run your Twine creations. And with the version of Twine that we're looking at today, the default version, Harlow, I think it does a great job of balancing ease of use for beginners with flexibility to do really advanced things as well, if you want, as you continue to grow and expand your skill set. as I'm going along here, if you feel that I'm going too fast or have any questions, please feel free to jump into the chat and let me know. I have a lot of things I want to cover today, and so I'm going to try and cover a lot of ground quickly, but I don't want to leave anyone behind either. So things that can be made with Twine. As I said, digital, interactive, and nonlinear stories, text-based games, and I've also started using it for creating tools that I use in the classroom. So not necessarily a story or a game, but some, more functional apps that I actually use with my students. It can be used for interactive multimedia presentations like I'm doing right now. Although it's mainly text-based, you can embed photos and videos. And yeah, it's very flexible with what you can do with it. So to get started here, and just to give everyone a taste of some of the things that you can do with Twine, I have a collection of Twine games, stories, and applications that I've made or co-built with other people on my blog, which I've got it on the screen here. And also, if you go to the event page for this session that we're doing right now on the Edith Lando website, there's a document there that says Twine Tips and Tricks, and the same link is in there that you can click on if you want. And I'll drop this link into the chat as well. That's what I should do. And just go take a look at this and check out a few of the, let me go back to Zoom here. Check out a few of the creations that are there. There's kind of a collection of some games, some tools, and I think I'll give maybe about 10 minutes or so, try to poke around into 3 or 4 of them and just see some of the things that you can make with Twine to get a sense of where its boundaries are, and then we'll kind of reconvene and move forward with how you can start building some of those things for yourself. There's a question in the chat. Can students use Twine on their iPads? Unfortunately, building things in Twine needs to be done on a computer or a laptop of some kind, but the things made with Twine, once you finish them and publish them, they can run on iPads. So I have done a little of that where students are using things that have already been made in Twine on iPads. Maybe what I'll do, just in case anyone's on a device that, for whatever reason, if the Twine links I provided are not working, maybe I'll just click and play through a couple with my screen share on, so you can watch that if it's not working for you for whatever reason.
James, there's a question in the chat. They're just asking if text to speech works with Twine.
That's a good question. I have not personally tried that. I imagine text to speech should work. It might get tricky when trying to do some of the more technical coding stuff, but for just prose-based stuff, I don't see why that wouldn't work, but I haven't tried it myself. And I'm just looking at, I'm not familiar with what RW4G is.
Hi, sorry, that was my question. It's rewrite for Google.
Okay, yeah,
And
I'm not
so
familiar with that. Okay.
I actually just tried it. So if anyone is familiar with the purple puzzle piece, which is an embedded into some Chrome browsers, I know that for our students with Chromebooks, they all actually have the extension preloaded. So I just tried it with your the Druid game that I was looking at, and it works. So
Awesome, thank you.
yeah, no problem.
I think we'll just do a couple more minutes of the explorations. So if you wanted to check out any more, might be a time to switch to another one. A lot of them might be a little long to check out the whole game or story in just the short time we've got here for this.
Hi, everyone. My apologies. I think we've lost our facilitator. Hopefully he's just logging back in. But if everyone can hang tight for a few minutes, I will let you know what's going on. Thank you.
Hi, sorry everyone. I seem to have gotten bumped off my Wi-Fi. All right. Well, I think that's been about 10 minutes of kind of digging through the stuff. So hopefully everyone got a sense of some of the things that are possible to make with Twine. That same document I mentioned earlier on the website page for this event on the Edith Lando Center website. That document is definitely one to have a copy of saved or downloaded for later, because it has tons of information that if you're interested in doing more Twine stuff, it's a great resource that I've tried to put together with more stuff than I'll be able to show or tell you today during this session. But yeah, what I figured I'd do is kind of walk everyone through building a story / game and showing you some of the things that you've seen already in some of the projects and how those are put together in the Twine program. So if we're ready to move forward to the next step here, to pop a link into the chat here for twinery.org is the website. Oh, I guess I got to add the HTTPS. There we go. Is our website for getting started with Twine. And it'll present you the option to download it to your computer or use it in the browser. Both options are identical for all intents and purposes, with the exception of if you're planning to use Twine a lot, I recommend downloading it later just because your files are more securely saved in your computer then. If you use it in the browser, it just saves things in your web browser memory, which usually works okay, but isn't quite as stable. So for today, I'm gonna, actually, I'll start screen sharing. I'm just gonna use it in the web browser. Let me get my screen sharing going. And share screen. And that's actually one of the things that I really like about Twine in a school setting is the fact that you can use it without having to download anything. So if you don't have download permissions on the computers in the computer lab, use it in the browser and it's just as fully featured and powerful as the desktop version. So it might be a little tricky to try to follow along at the same time as me. So I don't know, I'll leave it up to you if you want to listen in while you're building your own, or if you want to watch my screen, because I'm going to be showing a lot of things visually. When you first load up Twine, I already have some stories here because I've used it before. If it's your first time using it, this space will be empty. And so to create a new story, we're just going to press the plus new button up at the top here. Oh, it'll probably ask you the first time too if you want to do a tutorial, so we can skip that for today. Because I guess I'm the tutorial today. And for your story, you can give it a name if you want, or you can always change it later. I'm going to call it Quest for Sandwich will be our story / game for today. And in Twine, the word story and game and app are all kind of interchangeable. Whatever you're building, usually within Twine, it calls it a story, even if it's more game-like. So in our workspace here, we have this big blueprint area and this one little white box called a passage. And passages are the core of our Twine games and stories. You can think of them as pages in a book or pages on a web page or little sticky notes on a board. And so we're going to end up having multiple passages, and each one's going to contain different prose and coding and all kinds of stuff. So to edit the contents of a passage, we just double click and it'll open up an editor box. And whatever we write into here will become a part of the game or story we're creating. So for our starting story here, just like a choose your own adventure style. You are very hungry. Your tummy is rumbling. You need a sandwich. So everything that we write into here, if we close this little box, everything we wrote into that passage is saved. If you look, you can actually see a little preview of what we've written on that box. And if we want to know what the game looks like right now, we can go up to the story tab at the top, or sorry, the build tab rather, and press play. And this will play our game as if it's a final finished product with everything we've put into it. And so everything we've put, which is not much, is there. Twine's default appearance is black background, white text. There's all the text we wrote. So Twine is, oh, sorry, I forgot I'm using the web version here. So Twine's real strength is in rich text, and there are all kinds of really, really fun and creative ways that you and or your students can make this text more exciting, even if you're just doing, you know, a straight up prose story that doesn't have any choose your own adventure elements. We've got our usual font kind of you know, decoration options like bold and color and that sort of things in this menu up at the top here, which is really handy. So let's, you know, take the word hungry, select it, press our color wheel. For just straight colors, flat colors is the word they use there for something that's not like polychromatic. So you can select a red color. When we add that, it'll automatically pop some coding in there. So we have we'll learn about macros and hooks a little bit later, but basically it'll automatically put code in to code the word hungry red. But as well as the stuff that you'd find in any like word program, you can do some really cool stuff in Twine, like here, let's go into the styles and more styles. We can do things like animate the text. We can have it rumble or shake or shudder or sway. And as well as having moving text, we can have rotated text. I guess you can do that in Word and stuff too. So we can just dress it up. And each time we add more decorations, the code gets auto-generated. Let's make that word rumbling, rumble. And so this is a lot of fun for students when they're getting into creative writing, just having the ability to dress up their text and make the words themselves more exciting. We need a sandwich. Let's put a little background on that. Background color. Let's do a gradient. Show different things we can do here. So now, just to test this out and see what it actually looks like, because right now we see all this code. It doesn't look that exciting. Let's go to play that and see how all that code shows up when the user or the reader goes through it. So there's all our bold color, rumbling, all that fun stuff there. So all that's in a pretty intuitive menu just at the top of our page here. Now, the next thing that really makes Twine exciting for storytelling is the non-linear aspect, being able to jump from one page to another page and have several choices of pages to jump through. So we're going to create a link that'll lead us to a new passage. And we haven't actually created that new passage yet. And the cool thing about this is we don't even need to have made it yet. To create a link in Twine, we do 2 square brackets. And what do we want the link to say? Go to the kitchen. And then close it off with another pair of square brackets. And this is our very simple code, pairs of square brackets to create a link to a new passage. And as you can see over here, a new passage has been automatically generated with the name of the text that we had there. Go to the kitchen. And if we go and play through our game now, you can see go to the kitchen is blue, and we can actually click through to that and it'll take us to this new passage, which we haven't written anything yet, but that gives us the ability then, if we go back to our first passage and create some more links to more passages. So go to the bedroom, side. There's no limit, or at least no limit that I found, to the number of links that you can have in a passage and the number of different passages that can be connected to. And one nice thing about the Twine editor is all these little passages like sticky notes, you can move them around and organize them visually in a way that makes sense for you as you're working, just to keep track of the different branches of your story as you go. And so this already gives you a lot of power for creating interesting and complex narratives. I run a Twine coding club for students at my school, and even just with what I've shown you so far, the students have been very creative, creating very big and complex adventure stories with all these branching paths and options that can loop back on themselves or loop to multiple different endings. So let's fill out the story a little bit, and I'm going to show you some of the things that we can do with coding, some simple coding stuff to make this more of a game rather than just a choose your own adventure story. Let's say if we go outside, our hungry character gets the idea of going to the grocery store. So go outside, you decide to go to the store. And let's give our character two options to get there. We take the bus, or another link for drive your car. And again, each of those links automatically generates its own passages with those names. If we want to, we can make it so that, well, let's play through this just so we can make sure it works and what it looks like. So go to the kitchen, we didn't write anything there yet. Go outside, you decide to go to the store, take the bus, drive your car. If we want to make this more of a game, we could code this so that these links don't show up or aren't clickable until maybe you've collected a certain item. Maybe you need to get your wallet to take the bus. Maybe you need your keys to drive the car. So going back to Twine here. So I'm going to introduce a couple of concepts that are at the core of the kind of the coding side of Twine. And these are macros, variables, and hooks. And all this stuff, I've got a big blurb about it in that document that I mentioned earlier, but I'll go ahead and show you how these work. Let's go. I'm going to put something in the bedroom here, just so we do something with that. Bedroom is where you keep your wallet and keys. So if we want to code this so that the wallet and keys can be like collectible items that we can use to unlock another part of the story, let's go ahead and let's just say we pick them up. You pick them up. So in order to tell Twine that we've collected these items that we've called the wallet and keys, we're going to use a macro, which is like a command code. And macros in Twine always happen inside parentheses. And I'm going to write set. And this is one of the most powerful macros in Twine. And as you start to type it, it'll auto suggest what it thinks you probably want to do. And I'm going to do $wallet to true. So the reason why I wrote $wallet, the $ tells Twine that this word here is the name of a variable. And a variable is a named word that can stand in and be given different values in the game. So here I've given it the value true. So this is something that's meaningful to Twine later, where I can ask it, if wallet is true, this option happens, and if wallet is not true, then another option is available. And our variables, they always start with a $. That's how Twine knows that we're doing a variable there. So set wallet to true means we've given that variable that we just made up. We can use any word we want. We can call it, set didgeridoo to true. And let's have another one here. Set. What's that? Oh yeah, let's do set keys to true for the car. And we don't just have to set true or false values. We can set a variable to a numerical value, like set money to say 5. We have $5 in the wallet. Now, this stuff here, the variables in the code, when the reader visits the page, they're not going to see any of this. This is happening behind the scenes. And if we go and play through our game so far, and we go to the bedroom, nothing there about the wallet and keys other than what we wrote in the plain prose part up top. But in the background, actually, I'm going to, instead of playing the game, I'm going to go back and use the test mode, test from here. When you use the test mode in Twine, there's this little debug menu down at the bottom here. And as you navigate through the game, go to the bedroom. In the debug menu, you can see that behind the scenes, wallet, the variable wallet is now true, keys is now true, and money is now the number 5. So these are things that we can now lean on and go, if something's true, or if this number is bigger or smaller, then we can have certain results. So let's say we want to drive your car. Obviously, if we want to be able to actually drive the car and go somewhere, we'll need the keys. So we're going to use an if statement here. We're going to make the reader or the player make their options change depending on whether or not they've gone and collected the wallet. So we can go if keys is true. And now the part that we want to be dependent on whether or not it's true, we're going to do single square brackets at the end of this macro here. And this is kind of the container. Anything we write inside these brackets is going to be dependent on if keys is true. Anything we write outside of that is unaffected. So if keys is true, you can, or let's just say you drive to the store. And we could say if keys is not true. Oh, I left, you know what? I'm going to leave that on purpose for a second. I left something out. If keys is not true, your car door is locked. And after making any edit, I always like to go back and test the story and just make sure everything works the way it should. So let's go to the, let's go outside, drive your car. And oops, I accidentally on purpose left out a little part of the code there. I was supposed to have a little colon. Interestingly, you can see here, if 0 is not true, if you have a variable in the game, $ anything that has not yet been assigned a value, because in this playthrough, we didn't yet go and get the wallet, a variable will just default to the value of 0. And because we're missing the colon there in the code didn't actually work. It just showed up as plain prose. So let's go back and fix that. In there, and you can tell in Harlow, this is one thing I really like, when their code's working, things get color coded, which is really nice. So if keys is not true, your car door is locked. So now if we play through that, go outside, drive your car. So now you can see because keys is not true, we didn't get the keys, your car door is locked. Now, something to be aware of, you may have noticed these little arrows on the side here, these backwards and forwards arrows. These function as undo and redo buttons rather than like a navigation arrows in the game. So right now, if we went to the bedroom and we got our wallet and keys and money when we walked into the room because we picked them up, if we hit this back arrow, we actually undo that action. And you'll notice down in the debug menu, the variables that we set get undone. So one thing, if you're designing a sort of adventure game kind of story or something like that, you always need to make sure that unless your passage is the end of the game, you're going to need a link going to another passage, even if it's back to where you were before. So going back to our editor then, we want, when we leave the, when we're done the bedroom, we want to be able to go back to that main starting passage probably. Right now I've just called it untitled passage. I'm going to rename that to start. And now in our bedroom passage here, let's write go back to the start. And something to be aware of with passage names and variable names, they're all case sensitive. So if I wrote start with a capital S, that would count as a different passage. And if I do that, it actually creates this brand new passage called start with a capital S. So I usually, as a default, just like to do lowercase everything just to avoid that happening. So now we should be able to go collect our keys and actually get in the car. So go to the bedroom. We've picked up our keys. It says in the pros, and in the background here, it says we have keys are true. Let's go back to the start. Keys are still true. So now if we go outside, drive your car, you drive to the store. So that's a very quick look at setting variables and then using an if statement to create conditional dynamic text in game, what's the word I'm looking for? Game states based on what the player has done and choices they've made. As well as being text focused, it is possible to put pictures and videos into Twine. It's not something it's really designed to do, but because Twine, it essentially takes its code and turns it into an HTML file, the same kind of file that websites are made of. We can use a little bit of HTML for putting pictures in. So I'm going to write a little bit of code in here that I happen to have memorized, but you don't need to. It's in the document I have, and you can copy and paste it. A lot of coding is just copying and pasting what other people have used already, and then taking the actual content in prose and making that your own. So image source equals keys.jpg. Now I happen to already have a picture called keys.jpg sitting on my computer right now. When you're working in Twine, again, because it's not really designed for using pictures, even though that code I think is good, the picture is not going to show up properly right now when I test it in Twine or play it in Twine. In order for this to work, you actually have to export your story to a file. So I'm going to go up to build, publish the file, and it's exported a file down here. I'm just going to pop it into the same folders where my picture is. Request for sandwich. Oh my goodness. I thought it was more organized than this today. Example Twine project. There we go. So now that my exported and saved file is in the same folder as that image, I go request for sandwich and oh, why did that not work? I'll have to come back to that. I may have written the code wrong by memory there. While I'm fixing that, are there any questions so far or things I wasn't clear on, or yeah, anything that has been burning a question into your brain while I'm talking here that anyone has? Not yet? Okay. So I'm going to pull up my own document here to reference and copy that code and make sure I'm doing it right. I did leave out the width part, which shouldn't be necessary, but. Of course, it's the part where things stop going as smoothly as I would hope they would. Replace the file. Okay, if this doesn't work, I'm just going to leave it for now. I may have gotten capitalization wrong or something. Yeah. Okay, I'll come back to that. I'm not sure why that's not working. While we're leaving that, oh, so back to the editor. As your projects continue to grow and expand and get more complicated, I'm actually going to back out and go to one of the projects that some of you may have checked out, the Druid's Apprentice. So this file was game was a collaboration that I made with some classmates in the UBC MET program for the video game design course. And as you can see, it has several passages, lots of connections between the passages. And this started to get a little bit tricky to to edit and navigate and figure out what was what and where. So just a couple of simple things for doing as your project grows that you might want to think about. One is just to be aware of the find and replace feature under the story tab. And this is really handy for finding, and let's say you want to find anywhere with a picture, we can take that little bit of the image code IMG, and we can search for that. And each passage that has a picture, or at least the phrase IMG that shows up in the code, will be highlighted yellow. If we wanted to find anywhere where we were setting a variable, we can search for the set, part of the set macro. And again, any passages where that happens will show up that way. And if you have something like, the name of a character or something that you want to replace everywhere, we've got the find and replace, just like in a Word document that we can use. Question in the chat here. Best way to collaborate on a Twine project. Unfortunately, there's no easy answer for Twine collaboration because when you build a Twine project, it's on your computer. There's no server to log into to access it from another computer. The two ways that you can collaborate on a Twine project are to trade, email the same file back and forth and add onto it in turns, which can be a little time consuming. Or what I've done in the past is splitting up parts of it where you've kind of mapped out what passages go where and having different people write different passages, and just having we had an Excel document with different passage names, make sure we were spelling them the same way with the same capitalization. And it was, at the end of the day, one person's job to take all of the code and passage material that we had all dumped into this Google Doc and actually paste it one at a time into the different passages. So that is something that I would love to see in a future update of Twine, but at the moment it's not very collaborative. One thing I should mention too, if you are writing for Twine in Google Docs or Word or whatever and pasting it in later, something to watch out for is quotation marks, which get used a lot in code for Twine. Where did my request for sandwich? There it is. When you write any quotation marks in Twine, like in my picture code that's not working right now, the quotation marks are what are called universal quotation marks. They're straight up and down. Whereas if you are using like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, when you type a quotation mark, it'll automatically replace it with a left-sided or right-sided quotation mark. And if you copy and paste code in that has left and right-sided quotation marks, it will not be rendered properly by Twine. So that's a great chance for the find and replace feature. If you realize you have a bunch of code that was made somewhere else and pasted in, and all the quotation marks are slanted left and right, you can find and replace all the left and right quotation marks for straight up and down ones. And also, speaking of large projects, something else you'll find is as a project gets bigger and more complex, it'll be harder and harder to test all the different branches, especially if you have to click through pages and pages and pages to get to the end of one branch, and then do the same thing again just to make a different choice on that last branch. What you could do is create a special passage called Quick Start. You can call it whatever you want. I called mine Quick Start. And the idea with Quick Start is that it's a passage where it presets a bunch of variables that, if you want to jump into the middle of the story, a bunch of variables that you would already have set by the time you get to that story. So for example, if at the beginning of the story you set the player's name and customize their character, if you try to jump into the middle of the story without setting that stuff and it's supposed to be there, a lot of code will probably break. So a Quick Start passage just lets you set anything that you want set for a certain point in the game. If you have if your character collects money in the game, you can give yourself $100 or whatever, just so that when you jump into the game, you can test what you want and all your variables are already set up the way you want. And then in that same Quick Start passage, you have links that lead out to different points in the middle of the game. So this is how you drop into the middle and test out that one finicky thing at the end, without having to play through the whole game to get to the end to test it each time. And because no other passages in the game link to the quick start passage, when a player plays it, they won't ever be able to access this page. This is something that you can only get to from the editor when you've loaded this in. And by the way, for any of the games on my site that you want to pick apart and look at how they're coded, please feel free to download them from, if you go to the itch.io page where they're hosted, you should be able to download any of them and import them into Twine and like take a look at how they work, steal the code, copy it, adapt it to your own. Yeah, so in addition to games and stories, which is the primary focus, I also just wanted to show quickly some more utilitarian stuff that you could do with Twine. I'm just going to pull up my desktop version here. And this is something that doesn't have to be made in Twine. You could probably do this in Excel if you really knew what you're doing. But this was a little project of mine recently called the Class Randomizer. Let's go back for a second, sorry. Here's my shared version of that. You know what? I'm just going to go to my website version here. Sorry, folks. And this is one that I've been using in my classroom. I often want to pick a random student's name or put them randomly into groups. And when I'm just trying to do that in my head, I'm not really being that random as much as I try. So I created this tool where you can easily load in Twine different lists of student names. These are just a bunch of made up ones I made for an example. And then if you're using this in your classroom, you can select only the students who are there that day, and you can spin the wheel to pick a random student's name. Or you can randomly sort them into groups. Let's say we'll take all the students and put them into 5 groups. And now they're all sorted. And so this is the kind of thing where, yeah, not a story, not a game, but a utilitarian tool that I've actually been using a lot in my classroom. And so this is the kind of thing that you can think about with Twine as well. It can be something that is more than just storytelling or game making, although that's what it's really best at. So I'm going to jump ahead actually, and how are we doing for time? Oh, good. Okay. So the quest for sandwich that I was sort of building in front of you, I actually pre-made a version that I think I'll open up and show you kind of the more fleshed out version right now, and just some of the features for how that works. And just gonna publish a version to file first. When you're using the online version of Twine, actually, by the way, publishing to file and saving and exporting a version of your stories, it's a good idea to do frequently. I mentioned briefly before the web browser-based version of Twine. It works just the same as the desktop one, but all your information is stored in your browser cache. So if your internet history gets wiped, or sometimes I've seen instances where I think it just needs room for something and it'll delete old stuff. It's not a super stable place to store your project. So publishing to file frequently, definitely a good idea. We'll place that old one there. Okay, so the more fully featured version of the quest for sandwich here. One thing that is really fun to do in games is to have a little header at the top where this is a special passage that inserts itself at the top of every passage you go to. So if you have something like a current status, it'll follow you wherever you go. Other fun things that you can do with coding in terms of the rich text elements, you can have links that rather than taking you places, links that just do things. So here I have something called the link repeat or link replace rather, where when you click on it, it replaces itself with some text or code that's inside it. Actually, yeah, maybe I'll run this one from the the debug mode so we can actually see what's going on behind the scenes there. So yeah, so open the fridge is empty. So we have text that replaces itself. We have links that can set variables. So rather than landing on this page and automatically having keys and wallet being picked up by your player, you have to actually do an action to take the car keys. So here we can choose if we want, maybe we can take the keys, but not the wallet. And if we try to take the bus and we don't have the wallet, you don't have enough money for bus fare. But we can drive to the store. When we picked up that wallet, oh yeah, we didn't pick up the wallet earlier, so we don't have any money. So if we try to buy the sandwich, can't afford to buy it. So let's go back to the bedroom, we'll get the wallet. Okay, so using lots of conditional statements, using if this, then that. Now we can take the bus because we picked up the wallet. We have the $5. Take the bus. Buy a big sandwich. It's delicious. It's updated our hunger variable to now being very full. We have no more money. Did we take the bus to get here? Oh, yeah, we have no more money. Can't afford the bus fare to get home. You're trapped here forever at the end. So if you're new to Twine, I encourage you to just create a silly little story / choose your own adventure game like this to just explore the possibilities of using if this, then that. And again, that document that I mentioned, I'll pull that up right now. I've tried to group this into a couple of broad categories with the really useful, juicy stuff is at the end in terms of, I've just got a big old list here of useful code examples. And this is all stuff that you can copy and paste directly into your own Twine code. And I've tried to set this up to be as clear to read as possible in terms of showing what actually happens when this code that you see in the editor is actually rendered for the player when you test the game out. Right, so any other questions, comments about what you've seen so far, or you've seen the other games, or things that you can do with Twine, or if you're a teacher, if you want to know about using Twine with students? Nothing coming up yet. Okay. In that case, I might skip ahead a little bit to the privacy part about this. This is something, there were some follow-up questions after the last time I did a presentation on Twine. So I'll, here, let me stop screen sharing here. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how Twine is a really good option for making sure that you can stay in your lane as a teacher or just someone who's privacy minded, but in particular when using Twine with students. So when it comes to internet privacy and coding online, one of the tricky things I found with other platforms is a lot of the times you need to make an account in order to log in and access the things that you're building in online tools. And that can be a roadblock for students who are forgetting their passwords and things, but it can also be tricky too, because that student information, their name, their email address, all that stuff is information that is, it needs to be protected and private. And if you can, there are services where they meet compliance guidelines for privacy and that all the data is hosted inside of Canada. But a lot of, especially for more niche things like coding, it's hard to find that and verify that. So what I like about Twine is that it removes the need to worry about that because everything you do is just on the computer that you're on. So when it comes to the actual things that students might be making with Twine, depending on your interpretation, I've looked at a few different if you the FOIPPA, FOIPA for privacy, it's a big document. I've read through it a few times. I've seen a few different interpretations of it, but even the work that students make looks like is actually covered by that and considered private. So even an anonymous student game, and I wanted to share a couple of examples of things my students have made today, and I realized that may not be totally compliant. So I wanted to walk the talk on that. Things that they make, even if it's anonymized, could be considered private. And so Twine makes it easy to share things within a known area rather than having to post to YouTube, or like I post stuff to itch.io, but I don't ask my students to do that, or I actually discourage them from doing that because it requires them to give up their personal information in order to create an account. But the things you make in Twine, you can export it as a file, and that file can be shared around easily. It can be sent by email. It sometimes with like OneDrive and things, it'll get grumpy about HTML files, but if you pop it into a compressed zip folder, an archive folder, you can share it through OneDrive or services like that, whatever your school district uses. And the other thing. No, I've totally lost my train of thought there, but there's a question that popped up here. Mr. McGinn, Zoom, what age of students do you use Twine with? So at my school, I use it, I'm at an elementary school, I'm using it with grades 4 to 7. So what's the ages for that? It's like 8 or 9 to 12. For some of the students, just using the links and text decoration is like they get loads of mileage out of that. And then I do have a couple students who are much more computer inclined and who have gotten into doing things like using CSS and HTML to really build more complex things within the Twine environment. So what I think I'd like to do now is I'd like to, and this is something I didn't have time to do last time, so I'm really glad for this. I'd like to invite everyone to open up Twine, twinery.org on your browser if you've not done so already. And unfortunately, if you're on a mobile device right now, this won't be possible at the moment. But to start building a little story of your own and playing around with trying out some of the variables that are in the document that I shared out, and or downloading any of my games and loading them up into Twine and poking around in them, seeing how they work. And I'd be curious to see what questions and comments come up as people are working through this for the first time, what sort of roadblocks you might be bumping into as you go there. Question about how to download one of the games. Yeah, actually, I'll walk through that. That's a great question. Thank you. So let me share my screen here. So from the, oops. So from the event for this, from the event page for this, if you pull up the document at the bottom here, tips, tricks, and best practices for Twine Harlow, and download a copy of this, this PDF here. Definitely save a copy of this PDF for yourself. And then, where is it? Just on the first page here, I have this link here to my blog site, SD41 blogs. And that'll take you to my page with a bunch of games and things that I've made. And for any of these, if you click through to the game itself, it'll take you to the itch.io page where I have them hosted. And down below the run game, if you scroll down a little bit, there'll be an option to download it as a zip file. And then you can, once you've downloaded that, well, here, may as well walk through the whole thing here. Show in a folder. It's being a little grumpy here. And if your computer is faster than mine, you should be able to see your see the file there and right click it and unzip it to get to the HTML file inside, which you can then import into Twine. Oh, there we go. Time travel apprentice. So let's right click it, extract, that's what they call it, extract all. And once you've extracted that, then you'll have a folder containing all the files. And that file there, we can then go to Twine. Where's our Twine editor here? .org, use a browser. And from library at the top of the page when we first open up Twine, that's where you'll find the option to import a file. And there we go. It's popped right open there. And now the whole game's loaded up there. And again, this particular game uses images. And if you test or play a game in Twine that uses pictures, they won't show up. But if you actually open the file in the folder where those image files are, then the pictures will show up the way they're meant to. That sound was coming through for everyone from that game. And as you're building through Twine or thinking about building with Twine, a few other tips that I want to mention, actually I popped them at the end of the document here too. Oh, what was I going to say? Right, the debug menu. This is something new with the current version of Twine that I really, really love. I'm going to take this story and go test from here. In Twine, if something's not working the way you think it should, like if you set a variable and the result you want is not showing up, you can always see how things are working behind the screen by pressing the debug view after you've gone test from here in your editor. Oops. Actually, maybe I'll do this page here. So debug view. And this will show you all the code that's going on in the background with these little magnifying glasses. And if you click into those magnifying glasses, it'll give you a step-by-step of what's happening in the code. So it shows you the code that was there, if keys is true. It tells you keys here is becoming the number 0 because we haven't defined keys yet. So that means that 0 is not the same as true. So our if statement is false. And so the attached hook for if keys is true did not happen there. And if you do something that actually produces a real error in Twine, let's try something that's going to be an error. Oh, I know. Let's go to my Twine passages down here. I'm going to intentionally make an error happen here in this test room here. So someone say something? Okay, so if you actually get an error, if you have some code that Twine just can't figure out, it'll show up in a purple block like this when you run the game. And again, that magnifying glass will show up automatically. And this is one of my favorite new features, because when you're coding with Twine, you're going to get a ton of errors when you're, well, not even just when you're first starting out. I get a ton all the time. And being able to click in and see what's going on that's wrong. So the code I was doing was set money to it -1. So I was taking that money variable, which earlier we set it to a value of 5, and itself -1. So money became a variable name money, and it became the number 5 because we set the 5 earlier. And the error that's happening here, it tells you the number 5 isn't the same type of data as the string 1 in quotation marks. Normally when we set variables to things with true, false, and with numbers, you don't need quotation marks. But if you want to set like player name to James, you can do that. You can have a variable that's just any word, but it has to be in quotation marks, and that's called a string, which is just a string of text. So what I've done here is, rather than the number 1 that it can do math with the quotation marks, it thinks I just mean the character 1. So it's trying to subtract this abstract character from the number 5 rather than the number 1. That's where the error is being produced. Oh, I see some things in the chat here. Don't see a download option for the name randomizer. Oh, that might be a problem on my end. I just uploaded that one. I may have to enable that option, so I'll look into that. Thank you, Trista. So let me, yeah, so I'll get that set up after the session's done. I'll make a note to add that. So while I'm at it, I'm going to show a couple other things I sort of learned the hard way as I've been building Twine things, and just some weird little, not really bugs, but weird little things to know about sometimes that can get in the way as you're designing your Twine games or Twine stories. So at the beginning of the example Twine that I was building, where we're very hungry and want to go get a sandwich, I had all those examples of, different text effects like shaking and color and all that kind of stuff. And we can do that stuff on links as well. Close some of these other tabs here. So I can find my way again here. Oh my goodness. Use the browser. There we go. So let's take one of these links here. Let's say we want to take the go to the kitchen link and add a color to that. A little flat color, and we'll make it purple. So as I said, when we do this, it'll automatically add some code around whatever we've highlighted. So we highlighted that link, we added that code around it. And now if we go test from here, we have something weird going on. We have an unclickable link. It's got this weird underline we didn't ask for. It's turning red. And you may have noticed back on our editor page here, it created a new passage called open square bracket, go to the kitchen. We didn't want that. So what's happened here is, because when we take a word, let's say red, and we add color to it, highlight it, add the color wheel. The code automatically puts a single set of brackets around whatever you want to affect with the color or text effect. And what happens is when we do that to a link, it can get a little confused, and it'll try to turn the first bracket from our color hook, and then it'll see what's supposed to be the first bracket of our link, but it sees those two brackets together and thinks, oh, that's the first two brackets of a link. And so then it says, okay, the name of this link must be open bracket, go to the kitchen. So simple fix for this. If you're adding things to a link, just add a little space in there to separate those first two. And now if we test this again. Okay, so now it's purple the way it's supposed to be, and it's clickable. And yeah, little weird things like that. They pop up now and then, but generally speaking, the code is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to show a couple more examples from my document here. And this is one of my favorite ones and one that my students love using. I think it's at the bottom of, yeah, here we go. So this is the prompt macro, and this actually lets the player input some information to set a variable themselves. So I'm going to copy the code here, set player name to prompt. My name is, and I'm just going to copy all that verbatim. Go back to Twine. And on the very first page here, I'm going to put this above everything else. I'm going to paste that in. And so we have a set macro here. We're setting the player name variable to, and then we have another macro nested inside that macro, prompt, which will cause a little box to pop up. My name is, and then a space for whatever we put in there when we play through will be set to the player name variable. So test from here. So there's our pop-up. My name is James. And our debug menu player name is now James. We haven't written player name anywhere in the game yet, so let's go back and do that. So here. Let's put something in the kitchen. Your kitchen is decorated with stylized picture of your name. And then I'm going to do $ player name. So the variable player name. Yeah, so far we've just shown variables as behind the scenes stuff, but if you put a variable right into your plain prose like this, Twine will take that and will replace it when it's rendered as whatever you've set the value to. So if we just go straight into this, just test straight into that passage without having set the value, your name is 0, hasn't been set to anything yet. But if we run it from the beginning and set my name is James, and then we go to the kitchen. The kitchen is decorated with stylized picture of your name, James, and it just shows up as plain text like that. So in terms of other interactive rich text things as well, first of all, I highly recommend checking out the full Harlow manual. I have a link to that right at the top of this document here. 22.neocities, apparently that's still a thing, .org. And this has a complete repository of all the coding possibilities. And it's got so many cool things for like replacing words with other words. So you can, for example, combine the that player input macro that we just did with a text replace macro. And so we can say, take every instance of the word the in a story and replace it with the. We can take every instance of word and colorize it. We can take entire paragraphs together, block them together as hooks and have those replace and swap out with each other. Okay, so question from the text, can you show the rumble effect again, please? Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, again, some of the most fun options, these are all just in the editing bar at the top of your passage editor here. So let's take that red word red at the bottom here. I'm just going to highlight all of that, select all of that, go up to our text styles. And it's under more styles is where all the really good stuff is. And if we scroll down here, we can give it a rumble effect. We can turn it upside down. And if we want, there's also an option here to affect everything in the entire remainder of the passage afterwards. So even if I write some more stuff down here, more, go and test that. Well, there's our red, and oh yeah, because it's all completely flipped upside down. Some more stuff and even more. So I just want to check in because I invited people to start building their own Twine games or stories a little while ago. Is anyone hitting any roadblocks or have any questions about how some of the things you've seen in other projects have been done? And if anyone wants to just jump in on the, rather than the chat box, just unmute and speak up, that's fine too. How to add sound effects. All right, so sound effects, again, something that Twine does not necessarily do super well on its own, but there are a couple of ways of doing it. The simpler and more old-fashioned way, let me do screen share again here. The simpler way is using HTML code. And this is something that it doesn't work reliably on all browsers and all computers, because it's the kind of thing in the early days of the internet when everyone was putting sounds on their websites that was automatically playing, it got kind of annoying, and a lot of browsers started blocking the autoplay of sound. But this code does still work on a lot of devices. So it's about halfway through my document. And it's just this little bit of code here, audio source file name autoplay. And then that file will have to be sitting in the same folder as your Twine project when you open it up in order for it to work, or it can be a web address for a file that's hosted somewhere online that you have the address for. The other way, if you really want to do something that's very sound dependent, and I did one which was a ukulele learning tool. There is a big block of code called the Harlow Audio Library, or HAL, and this is something produced by a separate group of people who are Twine enthusiasts, but not part of the actual Twine team. But I've used this really well, and what it is, it's a bunch of they have full instructions on their website, which I have a link to in the document. It's a big block of JavaScript that you drop into your story. Up at the top of your story, there's a couple spots here where JavaScript and then style sheet for CSS. So for some more advanced web script design options. And these are blank to begin with. But with the Harlow Audio Library, you paste a bunch of code into JavaScript for here. Then you have to build a couple of special passages. Actually, I'll show you what those look like because I have that project on here. It's a Uke Composer. All right, so here's Uke Composer. So in my JavaScript area, all this code here was pasted in from the Harlow Audio Library. I didn't write any of this. They hand it out for people who want to add sound to their Twine projects. And then I had to, part of setting it up is you have to make a couple of specially named passages. So I have a hal.config, hal.tracks, and here I had to type in the names of different audio files that I was using in my project. So a bunch of ukulele chord names. I think those were the only two. And then inside the game itself, it's been a while since I've done this one. Drop down, repeat. Yeah, and then there's some special macro markup, like this master audio macro is not a regular part of the Harlow code, but it's something that works with the HAL JavaScript library in order to run audio stuff. So yeah, it's, if you want to do something with lots of sound, the Harlow Audio Library website has step-by-step instructions, and I found it was like, I don't know JavaScript at all. I found it was pretty straightforward to follow the instructions in order to add that as something on my project. And then just in case anyone didn't kind of hear how that worked out here. So the result is, even though Harlow doesn't officially support sound, you can have all kinds of stuff happening audio-wise. I just realized I don't know if I'm sharing my audio right now, but right now, every time I'm selecting a chord, the sound of that chord being played on ukulele is sounding. So another thing about Twine as well, everything I've been talking about so far, I've mentioned Harlow a couple times, but I didn't really explain that. So in Twine, there are different what are called formats, which are essentially coding languages for building your story or your game. Harlow's the default one, and it's the one you end up with if you just open Twine and start building. But there are a couple of other ones. There's another very popular one called Sugar Cube, which is considered more advanced. You can do more things with it. And actually, maybe I'll just to show that, I'll do a new story, untitled story, sure. So when you create a new story, if you go at the top to the Twine button, you can press story formats, and this is where you can choose the other languages that you can choose to work within Twine. So yeah, there's Chapbook, which I've heard is a little bit more limited in its use, but can be good for certain things. I've never used Paper Thin or Snowman, but Sugar Cube played around with a little bit. And if you end up liking one of the other ones, you can use it as your default if you want. But yeah, if I here, let's try to show what a Sugar Cube one would look like. This is the default. How do I just Sorry, I'm just figuring this out because they changed the interface a little bit, the recent version of Twine. So I'm trying to figure out how to change the story format, actually. View, story format, disable, use. Oh, use at, oh, I guess I can change it back later. Okay, use as default. Hope that doesn't break anything. No, it's still Harlow. Okay, so I've opened up a new project using Sugar Cube now, and it looks exactly the same, except we don't have that really nice rich text editor up at the top. And so you really have to know the code or find it and copy it in order to build stuff in Sugar Cube. And the coding looks all different. It's all angle brackets. I can't remember how to do any of that. So that's why I definitely like using Harlow as the default because it has those nice built-in tools. Make it really easy for you and your students to be able to do fun things with the text. Also, again, because Harlow is not it's very, and Twine in general is very text focused and not so visually oriented. Sometimes if you want to do things like arrange pictures in certain places on the screens, there's not a lot of power to do that, but it can be done a little bit. Under this alignment and columns button in the editor, if we click on that and go down to columns, we can generate a little bit of code that will give us as many columns as we want to. Let's go 3 different columns. Just keep all the defaults there. In our editor, it'll look like this. And when we actually render that and test it, we end up with stuff in 3 separate columns that we can write down into. So that can be used a little bit for visually arranging stuff. If you want to do something that's where it's very important that your visual organization is under your control, you'll want to look into using CSS, cascading style sheets. And again, that's not something that I'm familiar with, but I've, with a little bit of reading and Googling and a lot of copy and pasting, I've done a bit of that. So it's not, and for any of the stuff, if you look on Google for how do I do X in Harlow, you'll find a million answers with people just putting the code right there. Just make sure to search for in Harlow, not just in Twine. Otherwise you'll get a lot of sugar cube and other format answers. But a lot of what I've learned and figured out has just been from Googling and figuring it out that way. Where did which one's working in here? And then in terms of all the macros I was mentioning earlier, there is a macro button here that they've tried to, for the first time, incorporate like a organization and drop down of all the different macros. So you can just access them in the editor without having to go look them up. And so I haven't fully explored all the options here, but it does have some pretty cool options for being able to automatically generate some effects that might be trickier to figure out on your own. So like if you go and ask it to, rather than just type in a link with the square brackets and square brackets, if you ask it to generate a link, it'll give you some options for creating fancier transitions and things that, and different uses for the link that are just a little trickier to code by yourself. So let's say second page. So we can do a transition type like dissolve. Oh, and an arriving transition, that's new. We can have the transition take longer, the number of seconds, and link text. Okay. I'll put something on the second page. So now if we run that test from here, now we have a slow transition with a fade out and zoom on the side there. Okay, questions in the chat. How do you incorporate Twine in the classroom? Do students do these games in groups? Is this mainly assigned for homework or extra practice? So as a music teacher, I don't have a lot of overlap with having the students being able to use Twine as something in the classroom. But I do have it as just an extracurricular club that I do. But I could see this working as a great integrated part of like creative writing assignments. I would probably have students working partners on the same computer, although some have had great success just working solo as well. And the other thing I have done is I have had them play through things that I've made, like the Druid's Apprentice game is like a French vocabulary learning and practice game. So one of the French immersion teachers at my class, one day at the end of the year when we weren't doing much music anymore, I handed out iPads and had the students play through the game, and they had a good time doing that and were wanting to do that again and again forever. So yeah, it can be something that they're building, or for tools or things that you use for the students to actually use. And then did I hear someone on the microphone a second who was looking to ask something? No? Okay. Something else, as you're starting to build more, bigger and more complex things, I've started to try and get into the habit of adding annotations or notes to my own code so I can actually see how it's built. So there's a little quick link for that in your editor here. basically if you have the triangle bracket, exclamation mark, couple dashes, anything that you write in this comment text area will not show up in the game. It will not be visible. It's only readable when you're looking in the editor like this. So again, if I go back to, where did I start using that? Here's my share version of the class. There it is. Oh, wheel chance, I used to call it, yeah. So as an example of my class randomizer, because this was becoming pretty complex, and as I was going back and editing things and changing things, I was having trouble remembering what code did what. So I added a bunch of these comments just to tell me, okay, these here load pre-built lists into arrays. And yeah, just step by step for myself when I go back and try to remember what's there or why something is there as well. Since I mentioned arrays, this is a little more advanced, but this can be handy if you want to build something more complicated. It's just handy to know about. In Harlow, an array is a list of things. It can be a list of words, a list of variables, but just an ordered list that is set in order, and the whole array can be given a name. So in the case of my class list organizer here, when you run it and pull up let's just run the whole thing here. When you pull up a student's list from this drop-down list here, it'll ask for the variable for it'll ask for the variable for that list name, and that variable, rather than just being equal to one name, it's a whole set of names that are contained within an array. And then for the rest of the page here, there's some code that's going, okay, give me the first item from that array, give me the second item from the array, give me the third one, and so on. And oh, I remembered something I was going to say earlier. Sorry, I've been jumping all over the place today. I mentioned earlier about publishing and sharing your work, and how you might want to do that, and how you might want your students to do it or to not do it. So for myself personally, not for my students, but I have been using this website called itch.io, which is it's kind of like YouTube for games and apps. Anyone can upload their own games and apps to itch.io, and it does a great job of, when you upload your Twine games, making them available to run in your browser right from the website and run full screen without having to download it and do all that kind of thing. I am actually looking to move away from the site. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but just because I do host things here that I might want students to look at occasionally. I do kind of see it like YouTube, where there's lots of amazing stuff here, but there's probably stuff that I wouldn't want students stumbling across either, because it's just open for anyone to add their own creations to, and obviously that's not always going to be school friendly. I am trying to find other options for hosting rather than just paying for my own website hosting service. But in the meantime, if you're planning to use something just for yourself, that you're just going to run and not have students crawling around on the site, it does do a very good job of being a hosting service for Twine creations. All right, another question in chat, showing macro again for variables and if then. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to just small blank story here. Okay. So in your editor, if you start typing parenthesis and then set is how we create variables. And so SET with the colon, and then we want to give our variable a name, and this can be anything. It can be, let's set dog to, let's say we're giving this dog a name, set dog to Fido. Now, for anything that you're setting a variable to is the value. If it's not a number and if it's not like a true or false, it does need to be in those quotation marks. So right now, set dog to Fido is there. And then if we were to write, my dog is $dog. When we run this, the variable dog will be replaced with the value that it's been set to, if it's already been set to something. So test from here. My dog is Fido. Now using the if statements, if dog is, it's exactly right with the capitalization, Fido. So we have if dog is Fido, and now we need to add what's called a hook, which is just a regular pair of square brackets, and everything inside this hook is what gets affected by the if statement. So if dog is Fido, let's say, Fido is a good dog. And now we could do, and actually let's just play through that, make sure it works. Test from here. My dog is Fido, and because, here I'll open up the debug view here. If dog is Fido, dog became the string Fido, Fido is Fido, so that's true. So we have a true changer, which means that the contents is displayed, so Fido is a good dog. Now we could write as well, if $dog is not Fido, we'll add a hook for that. Your dog is also probably a good dog. And if we run that right now, we still have dog being set to Fido, so we only see Fido is a good dog. If we go back and change Fido to Sunny and test it, my dog is Sunny, your dog is also probably a good dog. Another way that we could phrase the same thing here, rather than if dog is not Fido, is after an if statement, we can also use the else macro. So if dog is Fido, Fido is a good dog. Else, so if it's anything other than Fido, your dog is not Fido. So right now, dog is still set to Sunny. So if we run this, test from here, my dog is Sunny, your dog is not Fido. And so this is really good for the example I often use with my students is like finding a key to be able to get into a room. Let's say, how should we do this here? There is a key and a door. Let's make the user do something to pick up that key. So we'll make a link. Do link replace. So what this will mean is when it's clicked, link replace will replace the actual link itself with whatever's in the hook afterwards. So link replace, pick up the key is what the link is going to say, and then the hook that replaces it. When you click it, we're going to set key to true, and you have the key. Now on its own, that's not going to open a door yet. That's just setting key to true. So we're going to go if key is true. I'm going to show something that's not going to work at first because there's another concept here that I want to show real quick. If key is true, oops, you can open the door. Now, right now, if we run this, there's a key and a door, pick up the key, click that. You have the key, it got replaced with that. And in our debug menu, key is now true. Now, what happened is we still can't, in our code, it said if key is true, you can open the door. But when we clicked it and got the key, that passage hasn't, or that text hasn't appeared yet. And what's happened here is when we first load this passage, I'll just refresh it here. The whole text loads at, from top to bottom. And it's not constantly checking or refreshing to see if those variables have changed. So if we go and pick up the key and set key to true, there's nothing that's currently telling the rest of the code to check again if key has now been set to true. So that's something that we're going to have to add. So a very powerful macro that you use is the live macro, which basically refreshes something every interval that you state. So every 1 second live, 1s is live 1 second. And then I'm going to place a hook or a pair of brackets around everything down here. So open bracket, close bracket. So now everything inside this live macro is being refreshed every second. So that should mean that once key is true, within a second when it refreshes, then you can open the door, should show up. Test from here. There's a key in a door. Let's pick up the key. You have the key, and now you can open the door because now it's actually checking to see if that that condition was met. I'm just going to open up the Quest for Sandwich version that I made earlier in the day before this. Just see what other cool bits were in here that I want to show. And again, there's hundreds of macros. I put just a handful of them in my document. And I think one of the coolest things to do is just to play through other Twine games and stories that you can find, see what other people have done. But in general, if you can imagine it, it can probably be done. So, replace, we had, yeah, so in my pre-built version of the sandwich quest, we had an example of the if and else macro. So if money is less than 1, it'll tell you you don't have enough money to take the bus. And inside that hook telling you you don't have enough money to take the bus, then it has a link called OK, which takes you back to the starting passage, which was called OK. So you can have links that are conditionally revealed based on if a condition is met. And if it's not met, so else, then there's a different link there, take the bus for $1. And again, more conditional macros later in the game. So if money is equal to or greater than or equal to 4, that's a handy one too. It doesn't just have to be equal to. Set money to itself minus 4. And within that bracket there, actually, turn off these comments. This is another nice thing about the Harlow interface. I can't believe I forgot to mention this earlier. Anytime you click on a bracket, it'll underline and show you where the end of that bracket is. So this parenthesis, it shows you the close of that macro there. So for this hook that's attached to the if money is greater than or equal to 4, if I click on that bracket, it'll underline everything all the way along until I get to the closed bracket. So I can see visually right away, oh, everything happening in this block of text here, setting money to -4, this picture of a sandwich, this texting a sandwich is delicious, setting the hunger variable, this link, all of that's taking place inside of that hook of if the money is enough to buy the sandwich. And none of that will show up if you don't have enough money. It'll say else you cannot afford to buy the sandwich. Oh, this link at the bottom here, this is another thing that my students like making use of. It's just another additional thing you can do with a link. I mentioned earlier that you know, when you make a link, whatever you type between those pairs of brackets, just a new place, ends up being the name of the passage you go to, and it also ends up being the text that you actually read and click on. And let's say that you had something where, for your own organizational purposes, you wanted the name of that passage to be, you know, the bad end of the game, you lose. Just so I know for myself, if I rename that passage, I want it to be called You Lose. Oh, renamed the wrong one there. Name You Lose. One nice thing about Harlow's, when you rename a passage that's linked to, it'll automatically update that for you. Now, obviously, if we're trying to do a choose your own adventure, we don't want to have the option that says you lose right there. Our reader's never going to click on that. So we can have it appear as something else to the reader. We can add a vertical line just above the enter key and type in what we actually want to be called. Open the spooky door. And now when we run that, the reader will see, oh, did I do it the wrong way? Oops, I gotta reverse that, sorry. So we want the name they see first. Open the spooky door. There we go. So yeah, now the reader sees open the spooky door. When they click on that, it'll take them to the passage that's called You Lose. Now it does, if they hover over it, you can actually see a little bit of code there that it goes to a place called You Lose. If you're paying attention, there is another way we can do links as well in the document, but yeah, for most playthrough purposes, that works pretty well there. Okay, are there any other questions I missed in the chat, or any other questions that people had? Stop sharing right now. Or anything about the usages of Twine with students or for yourself? I'm kind of assuming that people are sort of plugging along on their own Twine projects right now, so. All right. Well, yeah, I think that's almost brought us to the time, but yeah, I want to apologize for jumping around a little bit there. I got a little bit scatterbrained with all the things I wanted to share, and it was a lot to cover. I'm trying to not dive too much into certain bits of minutia or stuff that's not going to be as practical, but hopefully that kind of gave a groundwork for what you can do with Twine and sort of how to work towards figuring out how to make those things happen for yourself. And again, please hold on to that document of mine if you think it might be useful. I hope it will be. And please feel free to go and steal my games and steal the code from them and use them to make your own things, because that is, you know, I think the best way to learn with this tool is to sort of pull it apart and break it and try to rebuild it in your own way. Oh, one more note here about, Yeah, if anyone wants my email, I've got it actually in that document. James.martin@burnabyschools.ca. Feel free to email me. And yes. Yeah. And yeah, I hope this was helpful to people. And yeah, if anyone has anything that you're getting stuck with, like there are lots of great helpful forums online where people post questions, but if you want to email me too, I'm happy to help if I can find some time. Yeah, it's this is the kind of thing where a lot of what I learned at the beginning was from other people in the MET program, and sharing tips and tricks and helping each other out. And I like to just kind of keep that going and pass that forward. So
James, thank you so much for your time today. It was like just wonderful. So much information. And thank you to everyone who showed up today as well. So we did record the session. It will be available in about a week's time on the same webpage. And that document that James prepared will also just stay on that page. So you'll always have access to both. And if you guys have any questions regarding Edith Lando or any of our programming, please email me. Thank you very much, everyone.
all right, thanks. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.